Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Just take your seats, please. Thanks very much. I'm Mark Stephen. I'm going to be chairing today's event. Welcome to our 6th Annual Leadership Summit. 6 years. Some of you actually came here as work experience for a start. Great to have a live audience in person again. We're also running the summit through our virtual platform, so a warm welcome to those of you who are joining us online. You're here in Dynamic Earth. Can you make sure these are switched to silent, please? If it goes off during a presentation, you have to stand up and do a little dance, and it's embarrassing. Toilets are located in level 2. You've come down past the toilets already. There's no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if you hear a loud noise, follow Ray. He intends living forever. And just don't wander off when you get outside, please. All catering will take place in the stratosphere, which is behind registration. If you're using the car park, you can get a reduced £6 rate by visiting the desk upstairs. The event will still be a bit different to previous physical events. Face coverings are now optional. If you want to wear a face covering, absolutely fine. Not a problem in the slightest. But most of you are wearing these lanyards. I'm sure that's been explained to you. Green, well, let's start with red. Red, no touch, no contact, nothing. Orange, fist bumps, elbows, that kind of thing. Green, more or less exchange of bodily fluids. We don't care. You know, it's entirely up to you. But please do respect it. People are still slightly cautious about it, understandably. For virtual attendees, you can submit questions during the main sessions via the chat facility. There's a slight delay with that, so try and get them in early, and we'll do their best to include them in the discussion. You can meet solution providers from across the supply chain in the exhibition area upstairs or online, and there are a number of competitions and prizes on offer, and a virtual leaderboard to reward online participation. If you're tweeting at all, can you stick in #DigitLeaders, and it just allows people to follow the conversations. I am not going to talk about the sponsors or the exhibitors or anything else. For that, I'm going to invite to the stage Digit organiser Ray Buck.
Normally I'd sneak down the side, but we've got our camera equipment there, so a bit of a dramatic entrance, wasn't it? Very warm welcome, everyone, and thank you very much indeed for coming to this, our first maskless event in 2 years. For those of you that have been attending our events over the past couple of years, you'll know it's been a frantic move from this wonderful physical environment that we see now, from the water-coolers environment of virtual events, and as well as they've served us, I'll be glad to see the back of them in a month or so's time. I wanted to take an opportunity to pass on my thanks to our sponsors and exhibitors. Over the past couple of years, they've not just supported us, they've kept us going. They enable our events to be free to attend. If you're an end user, you'll know that for the past 9 years, we've never charged a user to attend our conferences. We never will. That's all part of our community building. But thanks to the companies like And Digital, Checkpoint, CGI, Darktrace, Heriot Watt, Torch, XDesign, and Data Skills, it's thanks to the investment for these companies that we enable these events to stay free, and they always will be. So please do afford a minute or two of your time over the course of the day. Some of them have got great services, some have got great products, some have got new tech. Go up, have a look. And a lot of them have actually got quite good incentives for visiting as well. I know there's a number of raffles going on, so drop your name in the hat, and at the end of the day, during the drinks reception, we'll draw those prizes out as well. We've got a few more events coming up in the first half of the year. The next one may not be relevant to most of you, but individuals within your organisation will have a very, very strong relevance. It's our Marketing Technology Summit. So your heads of comms, your marketing managers, your marketing executives and your marketing colleagues, please do give them a little nudge in the direction. We'll email you details of this post-event. It's a 2nd annual event and the first physical version of that we're doing. I think we've got about 200 plus registrations at the moment. So if you do work in marketing or closely aligned with marketing and wish to attend that, that's here, Tuesday the 10th of May. We're up in Aberdeen. If anybody fancies a pilgrimage up to the Granite City for Digit North, which is our 9th annual event in Aberdeen for traditionally the oil and gas community, but obviously now with the growing tech community and innovation in Aberdeen. We're going to make that a cross-sectoral event. That's on the 19th of May, and our last event before the summer break will be Cloud First Summit here on the 16th of June. Those IT people amongst us will know that there's been a major scrabble to get yourselves more cloud savvy, more cloud adoption, less on-prem, and obviously you're building out a very strong cloud infrastructure and network. Obviously there's a lot of challenges to go with that. So here on the 16th of June will be a day just about the cloud, everything from project, infrastructure, software, culture even, of how you adopt cloud and bring your team into a cloud savvy environment will be discussed here on the 16th of June. That's it from me. It's just a thank you. Thank you ever so much for your support. Those of you that are online today, good morning to you too as well. We've got about 100 and something people watching us on our virtual platform as well. Thank you for your support. Have a great day. Meet new people. The one thing that I'm very, very keen to see is, yes, it's good to catch up with old faces, but if there's someone you don't know, bring them into your little mini network and invite them in to have a chat with you as well, get to know some new faces. I'm going to hand over to the more interesting people now, and thanks again. Have a good day.
Okay. As you know, the pandemic changed absolutely everything. In some cases, that was a complete pain in the backside, but in others, it really drove positive change. It forced innovation at a pace which was really unprecedented. This first session is going to be looking at how we can actually build on that. Gary Crawford is the Chief Innovation Officer for Waracle. And Gary wants to talk about the changes that we've actually seen in digital as a result of the pandemic. So Gary, thank you.
Thanks. Wow, great to be here, and to be honest, quite overwhelming. You know, I'm kind of 2 years out of practice with this, and you know, after 2 years in a VR headset, I feel like Mark Zuckerberg's just rolled out some super high fidelity avatars. So great to see you all here. 2 years ago, I gave a virtual talk here at Digit, and I'd literally just arrived back in Scotland with my family. We've been living in Sweden for a number of years, and then when Matt Hancock announced that UK airspace was going to close, we pretty much fled overnight to get back here to the UK. So it's absolutely great to be here. And you know, the talk that I gave 2 years ago was called "It's Time to Build," and the idea here is that usually when you get an economic downturn, the businesses that really succeed and come out of that really flying are the ones that double down on making sure they save money in the right places. That's absolutely essential, but then using the savings from those places to invest heavily in innovation and really fire out the end of the pandemic or out the end of the economic downturn really effectively. So it was a great talk until I received this message just a few weeks ago. This is every speaker's nightmare. You know, you come out with some bold statements, you put some lovely big visuals, and then heaven forbid this comes along and you have to suddenly stand up and be held accountable to the things you said 2 years ago. So Pete, Ray, they took me to task. I did what every good speaker does naturally, and I tried to buy some time. Just a bit more time, I promise. Come back to me in 2024. It's all going to be perfect, exactly as I said. But I'm afraid that they were having absolutely none of it. So here we are today. I've dug out the old slides, had a good look at them, and I thought, well, there's two routes that we could go here. One route is I try and kind of retrofit a bit of a narrative around some of these things and try and pretend that was really prophetic and everything was wonderful. The alternative route is we just face it head on, we call out what was right, we call out what was wrong, and we see where we get to. And I decided to go with the later. So the first of those big statements, first of all, was that there was a chance that the pandemic was going to force us into living a much more moderate lifestyle. We're starting to see some of these wonderful pictures, in this case coming from India, where the environment was cleaning up, we were living much more moderately, and there's a hope that actually Mother Nature's fighting back and everything's going to become much better, much healthier, we'll have much more moderate lives. We'll start thinking a bit less about the abundance that, you know, all of us very privileged people in this room undoubtedly have grown up and lived through a period of abundance. Everything's available as and when we need it. Perhaps it was partly true with this one. I don't think it was the true story. I'm not so sure that Mother Nature was fighting back. However, we are absolutely being forced into a world where scarcity is a new norm. So you think back at the very beginning of the pandemic and everybody was chasing around after toilet rolls and getting the last of all the essentials off the shelf. Ultimately, what we're seeing there is disruptions to logistics. We're seeing disruptions to storage of different foods. We're starting to see a very heavily optimised system across our country and across the world, ultimately, that is really under pressure. And the thing that happens when you've got a heavily optimised system is it's pretty fragile. It doesn't take a huge amount to knock it off stead and start to give some real issues. So we've started to see shortages on our shelves in various different places. I think one really interesting case for me was CF fertilisers. I don't know if you remember, but CF fertilisers, part of their production process created carbon dioxide as a byproduct. They produce across 2 factories 60% of the UK's carbon dioxide. Naturally, that's really key for storage of food, food manufacturing, transportation. The thing that really terrified me is it's also really important for beer. That's where I thought this pandemic's getting really, really serious. But what you start to see there is you've got a heavily optimised system where all these different interconnected things that we'd never anticipate are connected together, are actually really tightly woven in. And one disruption in one place starts to create a massive disruption somewhere else. So for many people, for all of us really, we start to be forced to live in a much more scarce way where things aren't always necessarily available to us. And then you've got the cost of living challenge. The cost of living really is escalating. The cases I've pulled out here in 1 or 2 newspapers, these are all stories that are coming about over the last few days, few weeks in some cases. Again, I imagine many of us very privileged people in this room, we're maybe not feeling the worst of the challenge of this right now, but it's coming. The cost of living really is increasing rapidly. And actually, when you start to look to what's the world going to look like for us in the winter time, once that fuel price really bites, and we're hearing scary figures like 40% of the UK is going to live in fuel poverty, it's absolutely terrifying. It's really terrifying. So that price point of the digital products, the digital services that we build, the digital business models that we're pulling together, it has to build this into consideration. We have to be much more aware of people's needs around cost and how they're having to give up simple things that we would have thought of fairly recently as essential, gym memberships or Netflix subscriptions. These things are becoming luxuries now. And that's a very different world for people who build products and services. And then the third aspect to this, in the scarcity side, I love this quote from Schumacher. He wrote a book back in 1973, Small is Beautiful. And in 73, what was happening at the time was Xerox were creating Alto, the world's first personal computer. Sergey Brin, Larry Page, they were just being born. They were infants at the time. The web, as we know it today, was still at least 10 years out from actually even being a twinkle in somebody's eye. It was really, really early stages. But even then, in 73, we were just starting to understand the gross impact of our industrialisation on the world. So you're starting to get these early stages of a movement towards thinking about the environment, thinking about sustainability, and thinking about the footprint that we're really having. Now, unfortunately, here we are, quite a number of years later, and we still haven't wrapped our heads around this. This is a major, major problem. The major problem is our abundance thinking. Our belief that we can use everything that's available to us and to consume everything that we want to consume. But there is an interesting thing that I think the pandemic is supporting here, which is a growing movement of people who really deeply care about this. These are the kinds of people that are walking out of our businesses day in, day out saying, you know what, I want something more. This isn't enough for me. If we're not contributing to the solution, ultimately we're part of the problem. So that is definitely a key part of something that's forcing that thinking about scarcity and moving away from abundance thinking. So there's a number of key things in here. I'm not so sure that Mother Nature is forcing scarcity onto us. Perhaps it is. You could probably make that link. But certainly there are a few things: fragile supply chains, our desire to actually make the world a better place now, and the rising cost of living. These are things that have to be at the forefront of our mind when we're thinking about strategizing, designing, building, launching and operating the products and services that many of you in this room are looking at. So that was my first big prediction, perhaps partly right. I'll take a half mark for that one. Another prediction that I had was our desire to connect hasn't changed, but the mediums have. Does anyone remember House Party? I don't know where it went. It disappeared overnight. Perhaps it was pushed out by some of the big players. But quite honestly, there were a number of fantastic nights we had in the house, nice bottle of wine, kids and family all gathered round, waving at Granny down the camera. It was lovely. And definitely the mediums have changed. We definitely connect with each other through many different platforms now, different teleconferencing options. I mentioned earlier on VR headsets. Believe it or not, I actually do quite a lot of work in VR collaboration tools now. It's incredible. The technology is really moving at pace. But I think the thing that I never captured here, and maybe this is more of an evolution that we're just starting to feel just now, is it's not just about what we're connecting to. It's about why we're connecting, and it's about the people that we connect with, and it's also equally about what we're choosing to detach from. I've heard quite a few times people talking about this me over we perspective, always in the context of enterprise and business. The reality is it's not me over we, it's we over work. So if we start to redefine what is that we, the we is our family, the we is our friends, the we is our collective responsibility to the environment. There are lots of different ways, and I think we've lived in a world where we think about work as the thing that we all organise ourselves around. Well, actually, that's not true any longer for many people. We're in a stage just now of kind of post-traumatic growth that's come from the pandemic. It has been a very traumatic experience, but one of the things that happens when you go through that type of trauma is you take the time to reconsider what's important to me. What do I want to do? Who do I care about? Where do I want to be? That puts us in a very different position, and it forces our customers to think very differently about the products they choose to engage with, and it forces our employees to think very differently about where they want to put their time and how they want to collaborate and what they want to collaborate on. So all the time now, we're seeing people choosing the great outdoors over the office, that kind of austere concrete or the strip lighting and the forced conversations and the boss that just keeps whipping you to do stuff and the pointless meetings that you wish should have been an email. People are saying, stuff that. I'm not interested in that. I want a life. I want to be with family. I want to do things that make the world a better place. People are swapping out the commute for their kids or for their family and for their friends groups. Why would you stay on a train for 2 hours or sit in traffic, mind-numbingly waiting to get to the office to go through all those pain points that we've just described? And yes, of course, there is a place for us all coming together in a workplace, but remember, perception is everything. And there are a lot of exceptionally talented people out there in the market just now that just simply won't entertain this. We're going to start seeing a massive separation of the businesses that can find a way, and it's not easy, but the businesses that can find a way to create environments that attract people and allow them that flexibility, and the businesses that simply don't. And then the other thing is people are choosing their passion now over paperwork. People are fed up looking at spreadsheets and crunching numbers, and yes, that's an essential part of business, but much of the leaving, much of the kind of great exodus of people from our businesses is because they're taking on higher purpose causes, whether that's because they're really passionate about pottery, or maybe they want to paint stuff, or maybe they want to write, or they're doing things that is a little bit more spiritual, a little bit more about them. They're choosing to be the people that they want to be. And if we want to have these people in our business, we have to find ways of rethinking our organisations, whether it's the traditional line management structures or the reward systems or the pigeonholing. Well, you're this person, you sit in that box and don't do anything like that. They're not interested. They want passion. They want fun. They want to feel like they're improving the world and they're doing something better than they would be doing somewhere else. And if we can't compete with that, we'll continue to see salaries rising because we have to pay people much more money to come and do something that they really don't want to do. And you never get a huge amount from people if they don't want to do something. So that is the second big prediction. Partly right, again, perhaps. We are connecting through different things, but definitely we're choosing to connect to different things and different people. More importantly, we're choosing to detach from things that's really important. I think the message here, whether it's products and services that you build or whether it's employees that you're looking after and caring for and teams and capabilities you're building, I think this is very impactful. So the third of the big statements I made back in 2020, I spoke a little bit then about the economic crash back in 2008. And consistent with all economic crashes historically, you start to see a huge amounts of grassroots innovation. People who perhaps have lost jobs, they're needing to move and do new things, they need to find new uses for their time. Importantly, they need new economic kind of sources, they need to find new money that can come in and support their lifestyle. And And then, of course, you've got the big players investing heavily, and how do they accelerate out of the kind of downturn? So back in 2008, you had some of these very familiar brands starting to creep up, you know. People are saying, I'm without work now, but I've got a car, and my car sits there 90% of the time doing absolutely nothing. I'll put my time into the platform, and I'll sign my car up. And then, of course, the platforms, these big platform players are great at saying, you've got capacity here, this person wants access to that capacity, we'll bring these two things together. So people with cars and spare time can connect with people who want to go somewhere. People with spare rooms and, you know, time to make sure that the room's all ready for people to come can connect with people who want really good price or a little bit different kind of accommodation where they want to stay. Same with TaskRabbit with your capabilities at DIY or going shopping for people. Deliveroo, you know, if I was a bit younger and fitter, I could get on a bike and I could deliver the food that more often than not I'm ordering these days. But you get the drift. These big platforms came about 2008, round about that era, and it took advantage of all of these people losing work and doing interesting things. That was the start of the gig economy. You know, we hear about the gig economy all the time these days. We're seeing the very same thing happening now, and it relates closely to one or two of the earlier predictions that we spoke about. But this is a side hustle economy. It's a little bit different. It's still part of that big gig picture, but the difference between a side gig and a side hustle is a side gig it's another job, it's another employer, it's another turn up, do your thing, get your money, check out again. A side hustle is back about that passion. It's about something that you really want to do, something that you care about. It's your chance to make a difference in the world, to improve the world, think about sustainable products. You know, and there's many, many reasons that you might be doing this. So it could be economic necessity. That economic necessity could also be just simply having the resilience to say, you know what, boss, I'm not putting up with this anymore, and walk out the door because you've got a reasonable revenue stream running alongside your main employment. This is commonplace. You know, and if you think anybody in your organisations aren't doing this, I tell you now, they will be. You're maybe just not aware of it. This is one of the things that allows people to walk out en masse. Some people, it's just simply an act of rebellion. You know, I am absolutely sick of this. I don't want any more of this. You're not doing the things that you want. I'm not passionate about this. You know, this is my salute to you. I'm walking out. I'm going to do my own thing. You know, why wouldn't they? And then in some cases, it's just simply plain fun. You know, who doesn't enjoy their hobby? If you had a chance to make a huge amount of money from your hobby, have a great time, feel like you're doing something really rewarding day in, day out, of course you're going to do that. It makes sense. And this is all enabled because the technology is getting to a stage now that allows people to be able to contribute and take up new things. It's no longer scary to try and make money from a side hustle. If you don't know how to do something, someone on YouTube will tell you how to do it. If you're still really stuck, someone on Upwork will chip in and, you know, they'll do it for a few hours and a few quid, you know, probably at quite a reasonable price because they're maybe not here in the UK. You know, if you want advice in your finances or if you want an account and you're a freelancer, these things are all achievable now. They weren't achievable a few years ago. So people are genuinely turning these into meaningful businesses, meaningful streams of work, and gives them that flexibility that perhaps our traditional businesses can't really offer. And I think closely related to this, and I'm not going to dwell long on this one because I think we've all heard about the metaverse, we've all heard about VR, we're all hearing about all these different things, and just because I've got innovation in my title, and you know, it doesn't mean I need to speak about this for ages. But these are some of the areas where we're starting to see that massive progress. You know, you've got a huge number of people out there that are creating NFTs, or they're creating VR worlds, or they're creating new apps that give you, you know, contextually relevant AR information. These are the types of things where if you're a designer or you're a developer and you just want to come up with something interesting and new that makes the world better, you can do that type of thing. So we're definitely seeing some of these things that we spoke about coming true. You know, I spoke about 2 years ago. It's a short period of time, but these are really coming of age now. So the final big prediction, and probably this was the crux of the, you know, it's time to build talk a couple of years ago. But there was some great research done, I think about 4 years ago now by Bain, which spoke about the progress that companies made when they really doubled down on investment during an economic downturn. You know, and it really is an astounding difference. They really compound this progression over a number of years. It starts during an economic downturn, and I would argue we're probably just coming up in the middle stage of some kind of downturn right now. We're certainly nowhere near through it. But you should be starting to see little progress of the cans and the cans at this stage, and I genuinely think we're seeing that. But that will compound, and that will cause much more forking of those two different groups that we've seen before. Now, the thing that is different, And this is what I never spoke about in 2020. The thing that is different now are all of the things that we've just spoken about. It's not just about innovating your way out of things with the latest technology and the latest offerings and the latest business models and products and services. Actually, it's a lot more nuanced around some of those other things that we've spoken about, that individualism, that scarcity of product. So, for example, if you're thinking about your customers now, if you've got any steer whatsoever in what you build, why you build it, how you deploy it, how you market it, then affordability for your customers has to come really high up that stack of things that's important now. This wasn't relevant 3 years ago. This is so relevant now, it's unbelievable. And you've seen this in the market. Some of the big innovators in this space, you look at Netflix, for example, you might say reintroducing some paid adverts isn't innovative. I'd argue it is actually highly innovative. They're remixing different things, different tools that they've got available to them to make their service continue to be appealing to the masses that are going to be finding affordability really, really difficult. The other thing in this space is that greater good. Really challenge yourself to think about what are the products and the services and the business models that we're building, what are they doing for the greater good? Are we just compounding the issue by not actually helping fix it? Or are we really leaning into what we can do that's better for the world and help our employees and help our customers understand what we do? It's not enough to sit in the fence now. The world's changed. It really isn't enough. And convenience. We've not spoken about this, but the reality is over many, many years now, we've doubled down on the on-demand economy. People expect to be able to pick up a phone and do things in these micro moments here, there, and everywhere. Just because we're looking at affordability, just because we're thinking about the greater good, it doesn't mean that we can ditch that convenience. And that convenience doesn't mean, and that affordability equally doesn't mean that everything should be digitised. Turning your analogue processes into digital processes doesn't necessarily make it convenient, even if it makes it a little bit more affordable. We have to think about how you get the right balance between those physical experiences and those integrated digital experiences in order to make them meaningful and in order to make them work. And that's really hard. That is really, really hard getting that online to offline experience right. But that's where we have to be challenging ourselves. And then the other side of that, if this is a customer view, then this is the employee view. They have to have something that they're passionate about. You can't just put them in a box and expect that they're going to continue to joyfully work there and regard everything you do as exactly what has to happen. The world has changed. We have to find ways of allowing people to play to their passion. We have to allow them the chance to really dig deep, learn new things, and ultimately understand how the things that they're doing relates to that greater good as well. It's not just about the customer, it is equally about making sure that our very best people know that they're contributing in a positive way to society. And then the final thing is flexibility. You know, it would be all too easy to say, oh, well, we've got side jobs, we're going to ban side jobs. Ain't going to work. Because there are some companies out there that support that, they help with that, they find really good ways of doing this that works both with their company and with the employee. And it's those ones with the flexible approaches that are going to have the very best of talent and in turn create the very best of products, services, and profitable businesses. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gary. And I'm not suggesting this for a moment as a possible career option for anybody, but a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed a guy called Steve Feltham. In 1991, at the age of 28, he thought, I'm not doing what I want to do, and he chucked in his job, and he moved to Dores Beach, which is just at the top of Loch Ness. It's one of the most beautiful locations in Scotland. And since then, he's lived in a converted library van. And Steve is a full-time Loch Ness monster hunter.
Wow.
And I'm not being funny here. I mean, it's easy to laugh at the job title and what have you. I cannot remember the last time I met a man who was so content, who was so happy, who was so fit, you know, just in terms of his environment and things. And I spoke to him for about an hour, and in that time, because he makes these little Loch Ness Monster models and sticks them on pebbles from the beach, in that time he sold about 70 quid's worth of these models. The guy's probably making more money than me. So it's always an option, you know, and the points that Gary's were making, you've got to think in terms of these things if you're going to hang on to the staff that you really want, and accept the fact that you won't be able to hang on to them quite as long as you want to, either on a day-to-day basis or possibly long-term. Our next speaker, Paramjit Uppal, is Chief Executive Officer from Digital. Tech systems are great, wonderful, no problem at all. But you've got to get the people element right. Over to you, sir.
Morning, and I have to say thank you to Gary for teeing it up really well. I think Gary talked a lot about digital and touched upon some of the things that I'm going to talk about, which is about the passion, about the people side. And digital is no question, and I'm sure being digital leaders, digital is reshaping everything. Everything is being touched by some form of digital. My sort of, thing is that digital is great, but actually comes down to people. And what I want to talk about a little bit about is really some of the things that you can do as digital leaders to really address the people dimension. Because if you get that dimension right, doing all the things that Gary talked about in terms of the proposition for customers, your employees, for suppliers, my view is dead easy. It's the people bit that's really the hard bit. So I want to talk a little bit about the people element of it. And why I suppose the people element is critical is that we talk about digital like we know everything about it, but digital as a word, as a thing, has only been around pretty recently. I mean, if you think about it, when I started my career 30 years ago, the internet, Sir Tim Berners-Lee was just actually just thinking about the internet, was just coming around. And now we have a world where everything, we talk about this phrase about software is eating the world, but everything is being gobbled up, everything is being redefined, everything's being reprogrammed through software and data and code. And so we've come this kind of massive journey from nowhere, where technology used to be really hard, really difficult, really hard to do, to now where it's prevalent. Everything we touch, everything we do, everything we experience is digital. I was reading if you think about the reach of digital, if you call it, I was reading some of the facts. It's just incredible. I mean, if you think about the world population and the access to devices, the access to mobile, the access to the internet, whilst there are pockets that are actually absolutely not included in that accessibility, is something like 4.9 billion people every single day do something that is empowered, that is done through software, data, or code. And they're doing this every single day through the ability to take an idea and to codify that into logic, into databases, into code. It's just incredible the impact digital is having on the world at large. And then you talk about some of the the things that is enabling in the gig economy or the side hustle or those kind of things. All of that's being enabled because to some extent the idea that people have or the concept you might have or the opportunity you want to take, the ability to take that and put it into code, to put it into software, in my view, is dead easy. Actually, what you need is the idea, the concept, the capital is available, there's plenty of money around, the ability to code, the ability to get things spun up is dead easy. It's the people who actually make that possible, and that's the missing ingredient. So I think, in my view, the world is being gobbled up by software. The world is eating the software, and data is eating the world. But to make that happen, it's the people element that's really the biggest gap. And that's why I think when we talk about people and passion, as Gary mentioned, getting the people dimension right is absolutely the key thing for me. And I want to talk a little bit about what we do, how you can do some of the things that we think work well in your organizations, you as leaders, that actually will make it possible for you to attract and retain and grow the people element of your particular agenda. So if you think about it, is to build solutions, like I said, to build anything. When I was starting my career, to build anything, it was a nightmare. If you some of you in the room and through online will remember trying to write anything, trying to create anything 30 years ago, you had to start with the basic plumbing of everything. You had to write, networking code, you had to plug things together. They didn't work together because of different protocols and those kinds of things. These days, it's really dead easy. But really, it's down to the people who are involved in the activity to make that possible. When you think about the rate of change, if we experience the rate of technology, 30 years ago it was really hard. Where we are the last 10 years, where we are now, technology is changing every single day. Ideas are changing every single day. The way you build things are changing every single day. If you like, the rate of competition is changing. New frameworks are coming out all the time. New programming language, new ways of building, new ways of. If you just think about cloud infrastructure, the rate of change in these things, it's constant. And to keep up, you have to have the people that actually can adapt a learning mindset, a growth mindset, and I suppose as an organization to really appreciate that things changing fast means actually people have to keep up. And one of the things that we see is the march of technology, the march of what you can do with technology is only limited by your organization's ability to really get behind the idea that actually that march of technology is enabled by people. A number of organizations that we work with or we talk to, and they kind of hear the words. I'm sure they hear the words agile, digital, product management, everything else, but they don't really understand what it really means. And I think one of the roles we have as leaders is to really help organizations, our leaders, the broader organization, make that link between software and data and people. And one of the things that I think we can all do is when we see things going on in the world, if you think about anything that you experience yourself or you see on the news, if you think a little bit about actually what's really underneath that, what's made driverless cars possible, what's made SpaceX possible, all the kind of innovations that have happened over the last few years, what's made it possible is really people who have been able to take something that's really complicated, put into logic, put into code, and make it a reality. It's the engineers, the tech, the product people that's made most of the things that you see in the world possible. Making that link, I think, is actually sometimes businesses forget that actually all of those things that you see in the kind of physical world is actually possible because of the way you've taken an idea and codified it. Even if you can't codify it, the whole thing about machine learning and AI, all those kind of things, well, actually, we've got limitless computing power to take something that you can't even understand, but throw lots of horsepower at it, and you actually have machines who can work through patterns to figure out what to do and how things work. So really, the link between what's possible in the physical world is really enabled through software, through logic, through code, through maths, whatever you like. It's enabled by that. And when I say, software is eating the world, and there's a phrase that many of you will have heard, I think making that link for our organization, saying actually what we want to do, it's software, it's the code behind it that makes it possible. I think getting your organizations behind that is really, really important because then you can talk about the people aspect of that particular issue. So when you think about people then, so if you make the link between software and data really being the thing that's driving everything in the world, and it's a people thing, when you think about people then, I think the way I would ask you to think about it is look at a number of different dimensions. First of all, the individual level. So, we need more people, more individuals who are able to participate in the building of software, building of data solutions. And the kind of skills you need are actually different to what maybe needed a while back. And the skills that are needed are not just about the skills today, but how you keep up with the skills for a changing world. And so skills aren't simply about being brilliant at engineering. It's about actually what customers want, what experiences are relevant. It's about the creative element. It's about the kind of logical mindset. Whether that covers technology, product, engineering, delivery, but also the attitudes about how do I learn new things. How do I acquire new knowledge? Because in a fast-changing technology world, you have to be constantly looking at new ideas and new ways of doing things. That learning mindset, the growth mindset, some of you will have heard of, the growth mindset is really, really key in terms of the individual's ability to participate in this sort of era. So the individual is really important. The next thing is about teams. So think about people from a team point of view. One of the things that, if you think about what technology is doing, is touching every aspect of every, organization, every life, every society. That's about diversity. And I think teams have to be diverse as well. So if you think about teams, how do you create teams that have got the mix of skills, from creative skills through to engineering skills, through to enterprise skills, because a lot of these things are not just created in a vacuum. And this is where I think passion really becomes important. We talk about it's not a choice between I'm just an engineer or I'm somebody who's experienced design or a product. It's an and. You have to bring all these different things together. what you are, interested in, what you're passionate about, and having teams that have a real blend of these sort of different elements of skills, experience. It's an and. All these things together are combined together into teams that are multi-skilled, multifaceted, they're empowered, and in the team you have a diversity of thinking, a diversity of experience, diversity of skills that really makes those teams possible to crack and to solve any kind of digital problem you may throw at them. So teams become really, really important. And then the final people element is the organization itself. I think Gary mentioned a few things. The idea of organization of the past has changed radically, but it's still a long way to go. If you think about organizational structures, how decisions get made, how people value what's important, what isn't important. And I think organizations have to realize that if you're going to address the people element and create the agility, create the innovation through people, you can address the individual, you can hire great people, you can address the team element by creating great teams, but you've got to address the organizational element because the organization has to learn how to experiment, how to take a risk, how to truly think about taking something to live to their customers before you know everything about what's going to work, what's not going to work. But also as an organization, if you think about one of the biggest challenges we all face is about recruitment and attrition and attracting talent. In a world where, the gap between what the world needs and the availability of talent, you have to think about how the organization deals with things like attrition. The idea of the past that we used to worry about, somebody leaving as a panic, someone's left, we've lost all this knowledge and everything else. You've got to rethink that because now it actually is about how do you attract talent, how do you onboard talent quickly, how do you make it a great place for people to work, to grow, to learn, what's in it for them as opposed to what's in it for you, how do you make sure they get absorbed into a team so the team can be effective, and how do you also embrace the point at which somebody wants to leave the team or leave the organization. Because we have to get comfortable with the idea that people come and go, and it's a point in a journey for an individual to be part of an organization. And so thinking about actually how do you onboard people, how do you get people to be the most productive for as long as they want to be in that organization, it causes you to rethink about your HR policies, how you think about decision making, what you reward and what you don't reward. The idea of, in the olden days, we'll create lock-ins, we'll, incentivize people long term. Those things you have to throw out the water because actually the world doesn't think that way or work that way. So reimagining, if you like, how you treat people as an organization is really important. And one thing I would say is that as a leader in digital, you have to think about the rest of the organization, whatever an organization you're in. Think about the HR department or the old, we don't have a HR department, but think about whatever HR department you've got. Think about finance, think about other parts of your business. How do you bring all this together to say, actually, we need to think about people in a very different way rather than the old traditional ways of siloed thinking about talent acquisition or exit interviews and those kinds of things. How do you bring all those things together? And I would say as a leader in digital, the biggest job is not about technology in terms of technology innovation. The biggest role is how do you attract and look after talent. And that's something you have to do with other people in your organization, not just leaving it to HR or some other parts of the team. So if you get the people bit right, then I think you've got the ability to really go after some big things. And we talk about agility, we talk about innovation, all those things are possible. We get the people element right. And we do a few things that I think are interesting ways for you to think about what you could do in your organizations. So first of all, for example, if you take people seriously and actually think that is the key thing that is going to drive all aspect of your digital agenda, think about how you bring people into the company. If you really care about the kind of the person that you're bringing in, how do you engage with them? How do you onboard them? One of the things we do is we're now nearly 1,600 people in the UK. One of the things we do is we have an onboarding process that is really, really personable. So when somebody, joins, even before they joined, we know who they are. We have this idea of an and title. So I'm a foodie, and I talk about, the idea of and, we get to understand what their passion is. So it's much about you joining as a product developer and a mountaineer or a cat lover or an amateur dramatist. It's trying to really make sure we understand the person even before they join. When they join, I do a welcome. I do an hour and a half really in person to talk about why we exist. Now, you could have a video do that. You could put it in a video. You could do it in some other way. But creating that personable experience for the individual that they really matter to you as an organization is so fundamental. And particularly these days with Zoom and remote, there's no reason why your CEO, your founder, whatever, couldn't do a personal welcome to every new joiner to make sure that they are seen as being at the heart of the organization to drive that digital agility. So I think keeping how you treat people on the inside, coming into the company, is really important. And then I talk about the Untitled. That's all about keeping the person at the heart of the organization. To stop thinking like a traditional organization where somebody's just a number in a spreadsheet, or is a engineer of X, or a chief of this or chief of that, or a leader in this. Thinking about the person, what's their passion, thinking about what interests them, what's going on in their life. And one of the things that again, we have this second title, so foodie, and that keeps reminding us all the time about who is this person, what's their interests, what makes them tick. And I think you could, I wouldn't propose you throw away your job titles and create all sorts of random things, but think about how can you institutionalize into your day-to-day thinking the person, what the person's about, what the interest is, what their passion is, and make sure that everything when you do intros, when you say, hi, I'm X, Y, Z, well, the next thing is actually what's their passion, what's their interest. Bringing that to the forefront is really, really important to make sure that you are thinking about the person at the heart of it. We've banned things like words like resources or bodies, or if you're in professional services, the old thing, we just need a resource. Well, actually, people aren't commodity. People aren't just a thing. They're a person with a passion and interest for something, and they want to grow and learn. And I think actually thinking about that is really, really critical. The other thing that we've done, and again, I think organizations have to learn to do, is really think about how you optimize for the person versus optimizing for perhaps the systems and the controls that perhaps we've got used to in big corporates. So how do you thinking about things that are about putting the person at the heart of it without thinking about, well, maybe that's inefficient or maybe that's not productive. So in And, for example, we're 1,600 people, but we operate like an 80-person company. So all of our people, all of everything we do, we're organized into 80 or so person units. We're called a club. A club has 80 people, has a leader, has its own people lead, which is like equivalent to HR, has his own little set of clients. And the point is that 80 group of people, that leader knows their people inside out, knows who they are. They can make important decisions for those people. Those people know who their leader is and actually get anything resolved. And for our clients, it's a great way because actually it's a close-knit community for what we do and for our clients. It works for us, but I think one of the things that organizations mistake is actually the idea that as we get bigger, you have to have more layers of management, more layers of control. We have to control people, expense policies, all these kind of things. I would say think the opposite. How do you create small organizational constructs, small units, and have the benefit of a much bigger organization? And I think you can do that. It doesn't have to be in professional services, but any organization. How do you create units that are empowered, that people feel part of something, where actually all the things that matter for that person is in a small unit? And I think if you can do that, it requires more than just the digital leader, but that's where I was saying earlier on, you have to work with the rest of the organization, your talent, your HR, and your other executives to think about the talent from a smaller unit perspective within a broader impact you're making as an organization. And if you get that right, I think you create the environment for people, the environment for teams and the organization to go after some big things. So people at the heart of it is absolutely, for me, central to it. And I think just to touch on that, people at the heart of it, thinking about the person, thinking about the team, doesn't mean you can't grow or you can't achieve big things. We have approached and digital, our business, we've grown on really thinking about small and how you couple things together, and we've grown really fast. And just think about one little example about recruitment. In the last 4 months, so the beginning of the year, we recruited 390 people in the UK in 4 months. And in January, we were rated by Glassdoor as the second best company to work for in the UK. My point is that you can grow, you can achieve some amazing things that organizations want to do, but also keep the person at the heart of what you're about, because that's the thing that's really driving everything we talk about in terms of digital. So it can be done in terms of growth and keeping the people, the person at the heart of it. And that's the kind of, I suppose the challenge we all have. How do you do both rather than one or the other? And I guess that's the exciting thing about, being in digital, and we're all in this space where, we are at a point in time, in my view, where digital is reshaping everything. It is the thing that's driving innovation, opportunity that you can imagine. It's the best of times. The ingredient that's the biggest challenge is the people element of it. And I think if we can all participate in solving the people dimension, not only will we achieve amazing impact in terms of what we build and what we do for our organizations, but really go to the heart of some of the things we also believe in, which is around closing the digital skills gap. Because ultimately, to be innovative as an organization, as a country, you have to have the people who can do it. And closing that gap is really the way to go about addressing it. And that gap doesn't, with the march of technology, the gap doesn't get closed. It just gets wider and wider as we go on. So it's great to think about digital as an outcome. I think it's really, really important, though, to make that possible, to think about the people element of it, at the heart of it. So if you believe that digital is important to you and your organization, my view would be the solution is really easy. Focus on people, and the rest will be dead easy. That's kind of the way I think about it. And hopefully, if you've taken away a couple of things here that you can do yourself, that I think together, not only can we close the skills gap, generally, but we can close it in Scotland as well. So to me, it's a good thing to be doing, thinking about the people element of it and how that addresses the closing the gap that I think is important for everyone. So with that in mind, thank you for listening.
That "and" is a really interesting idea. I was sitting here trying to work out what it would be, broadcaster and what. And I frankly can't come up with a conclusion. I just simply don't know. Next speaker is Mivy James, Digital Transformation Director for BAE Systems. When you're talking about digital transformation, what do leaders actually need to do? So, Mivy.
Great, thanks so much for having me here today. I'm definitely full of the joys of spring in Edinburgh right now, having strolled here this morning from my hotel and enjoying the blossom on the trees and seeing the castle and so on. Edinburgh's a bit of a home from home for me, having worked for Standard Life 15 years ago before I joined BAE Systems. So I'm going to cover a little bit about my career history, first of all, not kind of because I think it's particularly stellar, but more to sort of demonstrate that what I'm going to talk about is through lived experience. And then I'm going to explain what digital transformation is in a nutshell, or what I think it is, why it's needed, and what some of the common bear traps are, leveraging Agile, and I think kind of overlapping a little bit with some of Paramjit's kind of key sort of people messages, leadership for digital, so what that means. So I think it's good that we're kind of corralling around some common themes there. I do have a bit of a call for arms to arms for you today as well. So who am I then? So I'm Digital Transformation Director at BAE Systems, and I'll explain a little bit about who BAE is in a minute, just to kind of set the scene as the sort of the scale of the thing that I'm used to doing. I'm a proper computer scientist, so I graduated in computer science and maths more years ago than I care to admit to. I'm a bit vain. But you don't need to be a maths graduate to kind of figure it out when I tell you that this week, for computer scientists in the room, we're quite excited because it's the Sinclair ZX Spectrum's 40th birthday. And I learnt to code on one of those when I was about 9. So I started my career as an analyst programmer, and then had I suppose, a sort of a fairly standard career trajectory in a way through technical team leading. Systems engineering is definitely my big passion, so how you do systems engineering properly, enterprise architecture, and I mainly work in what we would call secure government. So I do a lot of work with the military, but also Standard Life's a bit of a clue, banking and insurance. and I became an accidental consultant. So I accidentally stopped coding. It definitely wasn't a conscious choice. I think the scale of things I was dealing with meant that I just couldn't kind of switch between the strategy and that level of detail anymore. To do enterprise architecture, mainly governance, so how you set up enterprise architecture functions in big government departments, and supporting CTOs with their technology strategies and so on. And now I mainly support UK Defence on its digital transformation journey, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. But I also join up the digital thread across BA Systems. In fact, just before hopping in the car yesterday to drive to the airport, I was talking to some of my colleagues in BAE about digital transformation, what we need to do, and kind of encouraging a bit of a rebel movement, if you like, to get them to sort of be a bit, push a bit faster on Agile in their part of the business. So BA Systems then, I'm used to talking to defence people and everybody knows who we are, but if you're not familiar with us, we are the biggest defence company in the UK. We employ tens of thousands of people in the UK, and for complicated political and tax reasons that I wouldn't pretend to understand, there's a huge company in the States as well. We're well known for building things like aircraft carriers and bits of fast jets and so on. But I'm from the digital intelligence part of the business, which was newly formed on the 1st of February. And we are, maybe you can think of us as the data, digital and cyber part of BAE, mainly working into government. So not just the defence sector, but the likes of the Home Office and law enforcement as well. And we do mainly professional services. So sort of when I talk about digital transformation, that's kind of the scale. It's big government departments, BA Systems, we're almost like a big government department ourselves. In fact, you can measure our contribution to the UK economy as a percentage of the GDP. So what's the case for digital transformation? So one of the things that makes me super passionate about technology is that it never really stands still. So my smartwatch, which I should have switched off actually, because sometimes Bixby thinks that I'm asking questions of it when I'm giving talks. I found it must be something in the tone of my voice. It's got more processing power and storage than an entire data modeling facility that I worked in the mid-90s. So maybe I had a room about half the size of this, full of servers that had to build myself, so I literally had to get a screwdriver out and assemble them, because that's what it's like back then, for what we would now call a synthetic environment for trialling digital twins. And I think that kind of, so my smartwatch that tracks my runs and my steps and allows me to control Spotify without having to go to all the bother of picking up my mobile phone, really important, high-value things, actually has more processing power than the kind of massive room that I worked in to improve military communications. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I think digital transformation is now so ubiquitous. When you look back, it's easy to take for granted what that technical change looks like. But that's kind of going back almost 30 years, and I think that's actually very impressive how far it's come. If you look up digital transformation, so maybe Google it, lots of organisations reference it in a way that to me sounds quite passive. They talk about keeping up with the competition, customer demands and technical change. And to me, that's not really doing it right. It doesn't really resonate. I think we need to be much more proactive and predictive. So looking ahead and anticipating what's coming, planning some options and getting ready, or as best as we can, because unexpected things happen, like pandemics, for example. Now, another thing that I've noticed about digital transformation is it often becomes synonymous, particularly in big corporates, with specific technology implementations, like moving to cloud, machine learning, and artificial intelligence being the answer to everything. And those technical deliveries often run away with themselves, with the go live being seen as, tick, we've done digital transformation, and I don't agree with that at all. That's more about getting started. Technology is a tool to support organisational drivers. That's kind of a nerd. I'll definitely kind of stand by that it's not just about the technology. That's technology alone doesn't deliver you your business outcomes. And cloud, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on just happen to be the tools of today. We're not that far away from edge computing being the norm, and possibly even quantum computing. Doesn't seem quite as sci-fi as it did a few years ago. So digital transformation is something that we're never really done with. It's a state of constant change. The digital age really demands what I call business agility. So that dreaded agile word often gets associated just with software development, which isn't going to deliver digital transformation across an organisation. So to me, I find it much easier to explain a digitally transformed organisation by a set of characteristics that they have. So they're willing to transform both with continuous improvement, so maybe Kaizen you might have heard of, and through revolution, and embraces innovation. Gary talks a lot about technical innovation first thing today. And it needs to be cultural, not just in pockets. Like lots of big organisations set up innovation departments, and I don't think that's the right answer. It's got to be something that's a thread through an entire organisation. If it's something that's done over there, it's really hard to pull that through to operational capability. And it has an healthy obsession with improving the customer experience. Being data-driven is absolutely key. Recognises the power in data and uses it to make decisions and uses automation where appropriate. And I think that's essential as well. Some organisations, particularly the military, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn here, think that automation is going to fix everything. But in some cases, it's not going to be the right thing to do. And only ask for data that's used. So we have this insatiable appetite for more and more data, and yet it's overwhelming. Like I can't even manage my own emails on a day-to-day basis. And there's lots of kind of big companies as well who sort of ask for lots of reports. We're sort of a bit management information obsessed, but it doesn't really inform decision making. So I'm kind of sort of part of the rebel movement that I was trying to start yesterday in BA Systems, was getting people to say no to a lot of those things more often. So stop these cottage industries of management information. If it's not being used to drive decision making, don't provide the data. Again, I heard earlier the kind of phrase passion over paperwork. It's not quite passion over paperwork, but doing that paperwork that's not used for anything is soul-destroying activity. So let's just stop asking people to do that. And part of digital transformation is being very value stream driven, everybody asking why they're doing something, what value it has to the company or to the customers. Redefining the work and employee value proposition and experience. That's something that's forced on us by the pandemic, but I just don't think we've got it right yet. Hybrid working, I think, seems quite complicated. I think leaders haven't really got their heads around it. And there are some people, not naming any particular government ministers that I really have quite strong feelings for in a negative fashion, who leave little notes on people's desks in their offices saying, so sorry I missed you, thinking they should be back in 5 days a week. But I think that's a presenteeism mindset, which is terribly dated and shows a lack of understanding of what productivity and creativity really are. Being information secure is, for me, it's a bit of a hygiene factor. It should be something that's just woven through everything and not something which is kind of bolted on at the end. And having the infrastructure to accelerate digital strategy. So this is where cloud comes in. So exploits technology as tools to run an organisation rather than being dictated to by those technologies, and makes sensible investment choices and knows when to redirect that investment or when to stop. And that's when Agile comes in. You know, we hear a lot in Agile about failing fast, and I really don't see much of that in big companies and in government, choosing to actually stop something that isn't successful. And I think that takes a lot of courage, and I'd like to see a lot more of that happening. And of course, fast and agile. So key to being digital is having an empowered workforce rather than these command and control type hierarchies that we see in more traditional organisations. So it's a very cultural thing. It's a mindset which is underpinned by exploiting tech and is data-driven. And for me, that kind of evidence-based decision-making is part of all of that. And I recognise all of these things are something that BA is going through as well. I will admit that it's differing speeds across our organisation. It would be fair to call it a mixed economy, but I think that's quite common in big companies. And there are comparable aspirations across all government departments that I work with. And the pace of technical change means that some of the previous habits around scoping change programs and measuring progress just aren't fit for purpose. In fact, I don't think they have been for a long time. In my earlier days as a systems engineer, I often felt these things were quite flawed, but I didn't have the courage to call them out. And I think in the age of digital, we're going to begin to get a better understanding of that. You know, I got frustrated by putting my heart and soul into designing or building systems that I thought were going to be the bee's knees. Didn't diligently make the best use of design patterns and architectural abilities, only to end up feeling like a bit of a fool. Months or sometimes even years of work didn't meet expectations. So I kind of had to do some soul searching as to, you know, was it me? Where were things going wrong? And I realised this was largely because the whole programme had lost sight of the original intent, that the outcomes had become all about outputs, often with arbitrary milestones and deliverables being the things that get tracked, rather than the value to the organisation. And longer programmes, and this is something that I see a lot in government particularly, set out technology choices so early on because the contractual rules mean that's got to be the case. that technical debt gets accumulated before anything goes live, or sometimes even worse than that before the supplier is on contract, which sounds like a very waterfall way of working. So we've set out on this journey, and we're going to continue with it regardless. So that's kind of why I think Agile is part of the answer. Now, I don't know, I couldn't see anybody's eyes rolling when I said Agile, but the Agile people, so people tend to fall into two camps. There are those who are very evangelical about it, and those who are quite jaded or even cynical. So when I say Agile, I mean the original principles of Agile software development and embracing those across an entire enterprise, not just having them in the coding teams. I've seen lots of organisations try to flip this switch overnight and go Agile without understanding that top-to-tail cultural change that's required. And I think by comparison, it's quite straightforward to move software teams to Agile, and most software developers really want to work in that kind of way, but it won't reap the advertised benefits unless you uproot the entire system of process and habits. Even when there's a lot of investment in training, this doesn't alter those day-to-day habits. That risk and reward system, perhaps, that we have in our workplaces that many people have lived through the entirety of their careers is in conflict with that fail-fast mindset and really empowered decision-making. I've worked with some people who do a great job of talking the talk. They've been on all the training courses, they've got all the certificates, but immediately revert to type when it comes to action. And I'm not blaming them as individuals, it's kind of not through any fault of their own. A psychologist will tell you how hard it is to change habits, and that's why Agile leadership is so important. I'll explain a bit more about what I mean by that in a minute. So what kind of other things need to be Agile outside of the software teams? Everything CTO, so enterprise architecture, systems engineering, governance, technology strategy, and so on. Portfolio planning, so particularly how finances get allocated and where investments get made. Getting started on things, so scoping your innovation areas, mapping out the future and dealing with uncertainty, and not having these stacks of assumptions that can come crashing down like a house of cards. And most importantly, I think, are the leadership behaviours around empowerment. So all of the enterprise needs to work on what I would call sympathetic cadence and to a common to easy to understand vision. If that kind of headline strategy is too complicated, people are constantly going to have to check with their bosses when they're making decisions as to whether they've got it right. And I don't have a strong view on which Agile methodology any organisation adopts. I think it's kind of actually what's successful is much more down to the individual instructors, the coaches, and the level of understanding both of the business and the kind of ethos of Agile, rather than whatever the kind of the label says. That's just down to the licensing. And one of the things that's key to all of digital is artificial intelligence. It's definitely big fashion in government to talk about that at the moment. This is kind of a bit of a call to arms. You've heard a bit about the importance of diversity this morning. I've always been disappointed by the lack of pace of change of diversity in the technology in the UK. Now, I actually thought it was a generational thing that would improve as my own years advance, but the needle just hasn't budged since the initial shock that I had on my first day of my computer science course. When I looked around the room, I realised I was almost the only woman there. It really needs to improve in general, but for me there's this burning platform that needs to be fixed right now, which is artificial intelligence. If people are creating the algorithms that drive automation at an almost entirely homogeneous community, then the bias will be built into machines and will go unnoticed. People just don't notice. I've noticed this is something that I've observed throughout my career. When they're surrounded by people who are the same as them, we're very hardwired to notice when there's somebody who's different to us in the room. So with the rapid rise of machine learning and the known biases in data sets, and again, it's not Google's fault, but go and Google almost any job title and you'll be horrified by the sexist and racist stereotyping that takes place in the imagery. It'll be soon too late to undo this. Machines actually have an opportunity to be better than the rest of us, to be unbiased, to work around or even mitigate some of the systemic biases that we often fail to notice because they're what we've lived with our entire lives, but only if we tell them to. So as leaders, we can't leave addressing this to be someone else's problem. It's definitely not the responsibility or burden of those from underrepresented groups to fix, and it doesn't sit with HR or recruitment, and it's certainly not the fault of the pipeline. So it's our job to fix it through everything that we do, and not as an A or B agenda item that often gets slipped off management meetings. And then leadership for digital. The word of Agile may first appear to be one where leadership is less needed, but I think actually the opposite is true. It's really important to differentiate between true leadership and kind of day-to-day management. Leaders need to be clear on strategies, I've said, to get that buy-in of hearts and minds. They need to be able to empower people to make daily conscious decisions that collectively nudge the organisation in the right direction. And without the right leadership, I think it's impossible for an organisation to actually achieve digital transformation. In fact, the wrong behaviours will be frustrating blockers that result in digital, I don't know what the right word is, digital understanders to seeking careers elsewhere. So there are 4 key pillars that I see to being an agile leader. Setting direction and purpose. So having the prioritisation there, being connected with customers and understanding the purpose of the organisation, so keeping that simple. Authenticity, building trust, being trusted and trusting, being open and transparent, and having the right values to guide behaviours. Devolved decision-making, having that empowerment to act, yet being accountable for the outcomes and making the best use of expertise, irrespective of where they sit in the business or how senior they are. And collaborating on achievement, so teamwork and busting down silos and sharing knowledge and being open to influence and challenge. And finally, I kind of think if you regroup these things, there's this sort of leadership paradox almost, being both an enabler and disruptor. So enablers responsible for that clear direction of purpose, creating a safe space for people to try things out, and are coaches for improvement. Whereas the disruptors are constantly challenging the status quo and ruthlessly prioritising. And leaders need to be both of those things. People tend to fall into one camp or the other. So I think it's worth having a bit of, I suppose, a self-assessment and figuring out which one you fall into and then which one you need to dial up. Risk-adverse, hierarchical organisations just won't nurture those leadership traits. Some organisations may actively discourage them, or some or many of those behaviours, and without them being the norm, digital transformation won't be successful, no matter how much budget gets chucked at technology. So in summary, digital transformation is never really done. I feel like it's a little bit exhausting in a way, but it's a way of being rather than being a set of technical deliveries. Agile doesn't just live in the software teams, it needs to be an entire ethos or philosophy. And the right kind of leadership is the key to success, and it goes without saying that good leadership is inclusive leadership.
Thank you very much for that, Mivy. Right, chance to ask some questions. I appreciated the reference, by the way, to Jacob Rees-Mogg, the minister for the 19th century.
Try not to name names.
Yeah, no, well, I'm quite happy naming names, I get. Anyway. Chance to ask questions now. We've got a couple of live mics in the room, so ask questions of any of our first 3 speakers. Who wants to kick off? Nobody ever wants to kick off, but somebody has to. Thank you very much. Can we get a microphone to the front here, please? Could you, if everybody, could you just identify yourselves and then ask your question? Okay.
Hello, my name's Aileen O'Hagan. I work for Code Clan. You touched quite a lot on people-centred organisations, and you talked a lot about what organisations can give to their employees. And you touched upon, Gary, that there's a lot around the gig economy. And I feel like over kind of like the past 20 years or so, we've been moving less, like workers' rights have eroded, and people move into the gig economy because it's onus on the individual to create the life that they want to live. But do you think we're going to see a turn back to workplaces, going back to basics, providing good salaries, good benefits, sick pay, maternity, paternity pay, that kind of thing, to keep people in the workplace, as well as allowing them to nurture their own personal passions, etc.?
Gary.
Great question, and I'd love to say yes. I think what we're seeing at the moment really is a bit of a divergence between a limited number of probably slightly more digital first businesses that are able to do that and do think much more freely and flexibly about these things. I think there's a number of different organisations, many, probably the larger proportion of organisations that find that really difficult. So I would love to see in a few years' time we're in a world that is much more like you describe. I think possibly there will be a lot of organisations that suffer and end up not being any longer in a pile that perhaps take the lead. But,
Well, I mean, I can't comment on the other companies, but I think it's an and, in my view. I think you have to provide the right environment covering all those aspects and looking after the individual, the whole individual. That includes, rewards and benefits and, health and pensions. Yeah, those are a key element, and you have to provide the environment for them to flourish and to, practice their passions, those kinds of things. it's an and. I don't think it's about neglecting on those elements and just saying come and join for a purpose and it'll be okay, because all the other issues we deal with, I think you have to provide the hygiene factors, you have to provide the basics, and then you have to make the environment, which is about helping the individual grow and for them to practice what they are passionate about. It's an and.
Mivy.
So I actually have quite a lot of concerns about the gig economy and lots of drive to be self-employed. I'm going to kind of bring a gender lens into this because I can't help myself. But I've noticed that there's a real tendency to almost encourage women out of the corporate world into being self-employed, because that's the only way to have flexible working. And I worry about that because you don't have the protections in place that you work for a big corporate. BAE Systems paid my maternity leave. I worked part-time when I first returned to work. I realise that I've got privileged seniority, so I call the shots on my workload, and I can say no to things, and people, might seem like I'm quite quietly spoken, but people don't argue with me. So I kind of figure it out for myself, and not everybody has that luxury. But it's kind of like there's sort of a lot of things designed to kind of almost encourage people, particularly women. Or you've got kids, you want to work part-time. Well, that's sexist in itself. But anyway, I'll be here all day if I start talking about that kind of thing. But into setting up their own businesses, which to me feel very high risk and are not suitable if you need to be the primary earner in your household. And it might seem like a fun thing. Everybody wants to be a founder. It might be a fun thing until you want to get a mortgage or whatever, and all of those boring grown-up stuff. So, let alone when you start thinking about your pensions. So for me, I think that corporates are not getting it right at the moment. We need to change our employee offering. We're getting there. We're talking with flexible working. But there's still a lot more to do with that, to do on that. And what does flexible working mean? Because people can't have it entirely their own ways. We still need people to be in offices at least some of the time. We still need people to be able to attend meetings at a kind of mutual time as well. So you can't just decide that I'm going to work overnight, for example, and I never actually cross paths with my other colleagues. So that's kind of what I mean by we haven't got hybrid working right. If we can get that hybrid working right and that flexible employee proposition right, as big companies, I'd really like to see that happen, because we're losing out on a lot of talent. Because there are people who need flexible working for all sorts of reasons, and there are also people who want to have that founder-type mentality. For me, the holy grail is a bit of a mesh model. So you have a mix of, you're bringing together the best of sort of startups in the kind of under an umbrella of a big company. So you've got that safety net as well. I haven't quite figured what that was, but I pitched this idea to the chairman of BAE Systems a couple of weeks ago, and he seemed kind of open to it, so I'll probably have to do some homework and figure out a bit more about what it looks like, rather than us kind of going through the standard mergers and acquisitions model, which is kind of what we tend to do when we're interested in a startup. So that's kind of quite a long answer, but I do worry about those workers' rights. I think, I recognise that I get an awful lot through being an employee of a big company. I get my dental insurance and my health insurance and my pension paid for and my holiday pay and sick pay. All of those things really matter. And you may not recognise that until you actually need them, and by then it's too late if you don't have them available to draw on.
I think it's an excellent first question, and I guess it's completely unscientific. But let's assume the question is, are things going to back to decent levels of provision for care and all the sort of benefits and things for people in future? Hands up if you think that's going to happen. One person. Well done. Would you like to explain why you think that's going to happen? Well, we'll get the microphone to you. Hang on. Just out of curiosity.
I think the panel have talked very articulately about the importance of people in organisations. People are important in countries as well, in society. It's unsustainable for us to continue to erode individual rights and continue to have a decent society to live in, which is what we all want. So I think there inevitably comes a point where we have to go back to an improved set of protections for the individual. Sorry, that's a...
Okay. I thought your question was incredibly reasonable for a start, but it did also sound a bit like a wish list to me. Again, can we get a microphone to the front here? Sorry. I'm just making this up as I'm going along. Carry on. But,
I guess when I was listening to the presentations, which I all thought were fantastic, and I really do understand this whole bringing culture to the work and understanding people as they are as individuals. But I just kind of wonder if we're moving towards this individualistic, when what we need to be is being collective, which is essentially what this whole digital technology movement is professing and is all about. Like, we're going through this all together. So I just think sometimes, and we're in the middle of a huge great resignation is what it's been called, and people are getting pinched from different companies all the time, and Scotland's a small place. So I'm just wondering, is there more employers can do? And it's not really about it's just more about security and assurance for people, and then that will lead the way for the rest of society as well, because as we've seen over the past few years, workers' rights are getting eroded in lots of different ways. And then to your point as well about women in the workplace, and how important flexibility is, and how important paid leave is for if you raise a family for men and women, but then also I could go on and on. I'll stop. But it's just all very important, and I think sometimes it gets put aside in conversations, and we talk about the individualism more than collectivism.
a lot of this is happening invisibly too. My youngest daughter is actually involved in recruitment, and she will say things like, no, that doesn't happen anymore, Dad. You don't get that anymore. That's not the law. That's not the rules. And you think, Jesus, when did this happen? So it is a serious concern. Your question, sorry.
Hello. I'm Carla. I'm also from Coquitlam. So just kind of feeding on to what we're saying, I kind of was in between. So I think there could be a happy medium here. Whereas rather than focusing on what more a question, do we think that having jobs, permanent roles are outdated? And rather than hiring someone for a permanent role, why don't you hire them for a task and you say this is a project that we want you to complete and give them the time to do it? So say a year. If someone does that really super efficient, does it within 6 months, they get the pay for the year and then they can go ahead and go travel. Because I feel like in that way, we're actually benefiting and helping people who are actually really efficient at their job, and they're actually getting, getting the benefits of that. Because I feel at the moment, the way we have people, I know we're more flexible, we're still not fully flexible. We can maybe say, right, we're flexible between, you can work from 8 till 6, and then you can, decide your time in between that. But people who are really efficient at their role, I think, just get lumped with more work rather than them actually being able to get anything else. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts? Is permanent way of working, maybe looking at it, be a better way of doing it? And it means that smaller companies that can maybe only offer, we'll say, just 28k for a role, could just offer that instead and say, right, we want you to complete this task within this year, off you go. Mm-hmm. And then it means that it's more attractive then that way, because I would take that if I could do it and say I'm super efficient, I'll get that done within 6 months. I'm off travelling for the rest, and that would then mean that they can compete with these companies that are offering 100k for a very similar role.
Okay, Paramjit?
I'm really kind of keen to respond to that question. I think, touching upon the other point as well, I think I can only talk about it from a tech perspective, so not a broader society commentary, but from a tech perspective, I think the challenge we have is that we talk about what we want to do and the availability of talent. We have to address, if you like, how to close that gap, and we need more people coming into the sector doing that. I think the thing I would say is that for me, it's about you mentioned individual and talk about task oriented. I think we're so far away from that yet. I think because today it's a collective team activity. Talking about it's a team that creates what we talk about in tech. You need people joined together in a team and working together in a collaborative, bringing different skills, different experiences. They need to be secure that what they're doing is important, valued, and they can take a risk and take a punt, whatever. I think it's a team activity. Therefore, I think it's hard to say today, can you outsource a task to somebody? Now, maybe in 10, 20 years' time, where technology and the way we're working is kind of evolved, maybe that's possible. But I think today, the thing about, I think is about flexibility, is the opportunity for someone to join for a period of time, or join a team, join an organization, be productive, and then move on, do something else. That's fine. So I don't think it's a permanent thing, but I think you have to sign up to the team and the organisation for a period of time to be effective. And I think that's where I think you have to move away from. It's not just about the individual, it's about the team and the organisation, all those things coming together. So I would argue slightly differently. I think that may come, but I think the idea of individuals choosing a task here and there, I think technology and maturity of digital is probably we're a bit further to go before we get there.
Yeah, I agree with Paramjit. I think we do have a bit to go. There's one exception I do have to that is I lost an exceptional technologist when I was across in Sweden who went to join as a director of a company that was doing something quite similar to what you're describing. But their rallying call, their kind of way of bringing people in was that they allowed all of the people that was working for them to essentially be digital nomads, and they paid for their travel, they paid for their accommodation, they could be anywhere in the world. So after he left, I was in contact for a while after that, and he'd be phoning up and he'd be going down a river in some far off land, and 6 or 7 of them had hired a boat, and they're all working for different companies, doing different things, but getting that closeness, that sense of purpose, and that kind of lifestyle to do things differently. So there are companies poking at that kind of thing, I think, but they're not. We're not there en masse, obviously. Yeah.
My concern with that type of model is it doesn't cater for people who are long-term sick. It seems like a reasonable thing to ask for when you're healthy, but I've got colleagues who've been off sick sometimes for years, and we still pay their salaries. They're still a member of the company, a member of the BAE family, if you like. And it also doesn't cater for people on maternity leave and so on. So it's still kind of, I'm going to show my age now again, but it feels like a sort of a healthy young person's game. I think I feel quite proud to work for a company that looks at, we don't get everything perfect, of course, but looks after people. We do have people who've worked for the company for decades, and we've supported them through all of their life stages, including some awful things that have happened in some people's lives, be it their own health or bereavements in their families. And in some cases, people have taken years out of the workplace, but they've still been, a member of the company, and they're welcome back. And having that reassurance, I think, is really important for people. So, the kind of having sort of these set pieces of work, I think if you're able to do a lot of output, that could work in your favour. But if you've got circumstances working against you, that could actually be, that's not the right answer. So I don't don't think there's any perfect answer.
It's interesting how much of this is actually predicated upon, people wanting to flip from things to things, to be agile, and, again, as you say, to be young. Towards the end of your presentation, basically says something along the lines of transformation doesn't ever finish. It's a continuous process, which is fine for some people. Some people are actually going to love that, and lots of people are going to say, I'm trying to learn the job here, and the job, they keep on moving the goalposts. People really don't like it.
Yeah, dealing with change is a difficult thing. And I think it depends on the nature of change. If it's gentle and continuous change, then it's much more manageable. And if it's also your choice, I think it's much more manageable. I think people react very badly when change is something that's done to them, when they haven't been consulted, and they haven't been on that journey. And it's something that's sort of come down from above, if you like. So, like I said, with some of the sort of the rebel movement that I'm pushing through the company, I hope none of my bosses are here. I'm going to get into trouble with them. But I think that they're people who have an appetite for change, and it's going to be much more powerful if they're the ones driving it rather than, well, I'm changing because the boss said so. They're actually part of it. So it's creating that kind of internal culture for change, and it's within their power to drive it. I think when it's not your choice, again, coming back to the pandemic, it felt brutal, some of the change that we had to deal with overnight. And I kind of realised that, I felt like a bit of a spoiled brat with I can't do this and I can't do that. And I definitely got in a big mood about it, despite actually, having a home office to work from and having stable employment and being able to work from home and having the space and so on. But because it was something that was not my choice at all, it just didn't sit well with me. So I think if it's somebody's choice, but not everybody's going to like it. There are some people who needs to have that stability, who want to be in the same place every day, who want to know what they're doing. we're a very mixed company. We've got manufacturing and so on. So we do have those types of roles as well. But I can't promise that they would never that they never change. They don't stand still forever. What we manufacture changes. Our manufacturing has evolved over the years. One of our factories looks like something from a sci-fi film. It's got robots that kind of do things, it's all set up so that we can change what we manufacture kind of overnight. In fact, we did get involved at the start of the pandemic we switched one of our manufacturing plants to PPE equipment and another one to making ventilators. And we did that in a really short amount of time. So we can, so we've got that kind of business agility there if we need it. So I think it is difficult if somebody's utterly resistant to any type of change. But maybe if it's done gently and they're consulted in the right way, then it feels psychologically safe.
Okay. Time for one more question if anybody's got one. Right at the front here, please.
Thanks. Nick Smith from Ampex Energy. I really found your talk maybe resonating with me, the software matching up with the hardware world and bringing that agile working space into the traditional waterfall methodology. What's your sort of initial dipping your toe in the water advice of moving into that space? Because that's exactly where I am. I'm VP of Hardware Engineering. We have a software team. They're working in Agile. It's very effective. We need to match up our products. What's your advice? I take on board the leadership piece about creating a safe space and enabling and building that trust with the people who have the knowledge so they can make decisions. But what practical things can we put in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenges that we face being kind of, with our, you can't build an aircraft carrier in an agile way. We want to make sure that it doesn't sink. We're sort of grappling with some of those things around agile. But I think one of the things that I found quite powerful is storytelling to drive an appetite for change. So across BAE, we've got the sort of engineering fellowship scheme. One of the things we sort of do is sort of go and not telling people how to change, but to kind of tell them about a lived experience. And that will spark some interest in people who then normally come back and then ask, like, how can we do more of that? How can we pick up some of the agile? So actually the ventilator challenge is quite a good example of that because it was something that brought in people from across the business. Thank goodness we didn't need to actually make use of them. But we had to pull in some of our design engineers who'd never, it's not our business, we don't make stuff like that, and get in different kind of expertise. But we did also have to do it in an agile way because of the time frames, but it also had to be safety critical. One of my my colleague he's a great storyteller on it. Actually, he's one of the chief engineers on it, and he says, thank goodness we made a ventilator that blew air into people; it didn't suck it out. But having somebody who's been through that and is very passionate about it, and kind of using that power of storytelling to kind of help drive an appetite for change, as suggests as a starting point.
Thank you.
I think something that's possibly worth thinking about is, why are we interested in Agile? Agile as it stands just now, and I'm talking about the principles in the manifesto, not method. It's there because it's the best way that we know at the moment for building software. And if you were to try and sum it up in one way, and of course there'll be many opinions about this, it's feedback. Why do we need feedback? Because we're building software for humans. Humans are unpredictable. 9 times out of 10, we're going to get something wrong, and we need a way to reintroduce change into that environment to evolve what we're doing and learn where we've made mistakes. However, if you're looking at some of the stronger engineering disciplines, quite often you don't need that flexibility because it's not as unpredictable. You can get rid of many of those challenges at design stage. So I think it's always worth revisiting. I think maybe you covered this, exactly when you spoke about both and the thinking. If you can design something, you've got all of the feedback and the tools there for a very controlled environment to know that it's going to work. I would have a question about, is Agile the right thing? People think Agile is about efficiency. It's not. It's not. It's about feedback. It's quite often very inefficient, but it helps you get effective. There are more efficient ways of doing things if you're in a more controlled environment. So I'd say it might be worth considering more about how you chain together different programs of work and different styles of things that you're building, rather than attempting to steamroll agile principles and values across everything that you do.
So
Exactly that. Yeah.
a couple of the things that we have done with the big hardware platforms, I don't know how relevant they be to you, is the digital twin is a big deal for us. And particularly from a maintenance perspective, so that's something that we've definitely revolutionised. And the kind of using the sort of the big Navy ships as kind of an example, the old way of maintaining equipment on them was for everything to have regular maintenance cycles. So this widget needs to be replaced every 2 years. That widget kind of has so many thousand hours of life in it, so it needs to be replaced. And that's very costly. It's very costly for the Navy because it means they have to take a ship out of action at regular cycles and every 6 months or so, and it's like, well, here's the list of things that are due for replacement, and they'd get replaced irrespective of the wear and tear on them. So so we've sort of done quite a lot around building sensors and networks of sensors on those kind of things, so you can actually get I guess like the sort of modern fancy cars, which used to be you got your car serviced on a particular mileage. It's much more about wear and tear. And it's more sustainable as well because you're not replacing stuff that you need to be replacing. So there are some things out there where you can bring some of those agile principles, particularly into the maintenance cycle, which might be helpful.
Thank you very much for those questions. We're going to have to leave it there just in terms of time. But can I ask you to thank our first three speakers one more time, please? Thank you. We're going to serve refreshments now in the stratosphere upstairs. If, as Ray said, take the time to visit the exhibition stands. The next session starts at 11:30 and will be run as breakouts, and your breakouts should be noted on the back of your badge. Okay? Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you.